Okay, good morning, everyone. I was just going to check and see if we had the participants, if we have attendees, and we do have 2 attendees this morning as of right now. Okay, I want to open this meeting. It is 9:00 a.m. I'm Connie Cunningham. This is expected to be a 2-hour meeting. Staff, please call roll. Would you please call roll? Carrie, you're muted. Sorry.
Thank you. Good morning. So roll call for the Housing Commissioners for the December 9th meeting. Chair Cunningham.
Present.
Vice Chair Parrish.
Here.
Commissioner Gandikota. Commissioner Bose. And Commissioner Capil.
So
Did I say Commissioner Tadachari? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Present.
Okay, I'd only see 3 of us present. Is that correct? I mean, 3 of the commissioners. Is that correct? I can't tell.
That's what I see as well.
Okay.
And then,
So we do have a quorum. We do not have a quorum for the approval of the minutes at this time. So we need to move that then to the end of the meeting. Do I need to do anything special to move it to the end of the meeting? Carrie?
I would just recommend and then have an action and vote on it just to make sure.
Okay, I recommend that we move the approval of the minutes to after the finishing of agenda item 2. Do I hear a motion to approve that?
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we move the approval of the minutes to the end of the meeting after the agenda item. So there you go. Carrie, are there any postponements?
None.
Okay, and oral communications now are open. So we have attendees. There are 6 attendees. So you each have 3 minutes. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand so you can be recognized by the chair.
We do have a hand from Lisa Warren. Would you like me to open that up, Chair Cunningham?
Oh, yeah, would you? I can't see that her hand is up. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning. It's actually not, I don't want to speak, but I didn't hear you vote on your motion to move the minutes to the end of the meeting. I didn't hear a vote, so I don't think it's technical.
Oh, we didn't vote? Okay, let's vote on moving the minutes. Do I hear an aye from everyone?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Oh, and welcome, Sue. We now have a quorum, so we could do the minutes. We'll do that later. Never mind. We already moved it. So, okay. Is there any other speaker from the attendees that would like to speak at oral communications? Okay. I do not see any other raised hands. Do you, Carrie? So we can.
Is Lisa Warren's hands still raised from the previous, or is this a new? Let me ask.
Okay.
Hi, Lisa, you are unmuted.
I thought I lowered it. Sorry.
Okay, great. No worries.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we will close oral communications and move on to written communications. Carrie, did we have written communications for this morning?
I haven't seen any. Have any of the commissioners seen any?
The only written communication I saw was not for the meeting, but for the commissioners as a whole from the Sierra Club. But that wouldn't be a written communication for this morning.
Okay, then I think
I did see one, but I don't have my computer opened up right now because I'm on a phone. I thought I did see one come in from a gentleman saying regarding zoning, and I thought it was relevant to this.
I saw one from somebody by name Scott I don't
Yes,
have
yes,
his last
that's
name.
correct.
Okay,
So I just don't know whether it's applicable to this or not. So I just want to bring it to your notice.
Sure,
I mean,
sure. We do have that. That is for the actual agenda item coming up. And it was from a gentleman named Scott for the housing element piece. So we'll make sure to introduce that. And I have it in front of me and I show that it was sent to the Housing Commission as well. So we're covered. Thank you.
okay. Thank you. And we're moving on then to old business. Is there any old business, Carrie?
No.
Okay, now it is 9:06 a.m. and we are moving on to new business, which is agenda item 2. The subject is the introduction to the housing element update process and preparation for the mapping exercise, which sometimes you've heard it called the balancing act tool, just for information. And the recommended action is to receive the informational presentation. And I wanted to note to the other commissioners that this will not be a demonstration of the mapping exercise. All of us are commissioners are urged to attend this evening at 6 o'clock to the meeting that is a community meeting to discuss that mapping tool further. So what I'm going to do is just discuss the process below to make sure that we have enough time. Because the presentation, as I understand it, will be 45 minutes long. Carrie, is that the case?
We have a detailed presentation. I'll let the consultant team open up and get into that.
Okay, well, if it's 45 minutes to ensure that everybody has time to speak, we will have about 30 minutes to ask questions and so forth. And EMC may answer questions that are asked by the commissioners and the public. So the first round of questions will be 2 minutes per commissioner. And then I think we can allow 3 minutes per person for the public because unless we get, well, we have now 9 attendees. I may have to limit that to 2 minutes per person. We'll see how that goes when it gets time for comment. Then we'll have a second round of discussions by the commissioners, and then 20 minutes more for the remainder of the agenda. So now I'm going to turn this back over to, it's 9:08 a.m. I'm going to turn this back over to Carrie to introduce the EMC team. Thank you.
Good morning, Carrie Huesler, Housing Manager. We have a robust team working on the housing element, and here before you today is the city team and then our EMC consultant team that has been with us for a few months. Representing EMC for this item is Andy Flower and Lauren Herr, and I'll turn it over to you for the presentation and just support you in the background.
Thank you for that introduction. And this morning we represent a full team of consultants, as Carrie mentioned, and we're here to guide Cupertino toward a certified 6th cycle housing element update process. It's so nice to meet everyone here. Thank you for your service on the Housing Commission. We appreciate the time you've committed to volunteer and provide assistance and recommendations through this next year. It's going to be a busy one, so we're happy to be working with you. Next slide, please. Our purpose today is to present some basic information about this process, project timelines, and key milestones, a preview of our community outreach plan, and to learn from the Housing Commission through the feedback and questions you provide. Next slide, please. Our agenda numbers continue throughout the presentation, so you'll know where we are and have an idea how long we'll take. And we'll begin now with just a quick overview of the housing element, and here with our next slide. A housing element is a plan for the housing needed within a community. So it's for both present and future needs. The city of Cupertino does not build the housing, which is an important distinction to make, and we want to make sure that the public understands that. And the city of Cupertino creates the programs and policies to plan where new housing should go and how many units should be on potential sites. Next slide, please. So why plan for more housing? Well, for one thing, it's required by state law. It's part of the general plan. This particular section of the general plan is updated every 8 years. And this is now Cupertino's 6th cycle timeline. And it will be initiated in 2023 and carry on through 2031. Next slide. So as the Housing Commission, you are part of a team of advisory groups. And the first being EMC and staff. We're going to be doing a lot of the background research and preparation and creating all kinds of analysis and synthesis of a cascading amount of new laws and interpretations of those laws. I believe I've seen a report recently that said there's been 70 new laws regarding housing since the last cycle update. So there's we want to make sure that doesn't feel like a fire hose of information for you. So we want to make sure to bring that to you in digestible, bite-sized portions. So we'll be working together with staff to make sure that what we provide to you is appropriate for each step of the way. And we'll also be working with a stakeholder group. And we can talk more on that later if you'd like. That's still formulating. We don't have all the details yet for that, but there will be an opportunity for the public generally to apply. And we do want to make sure that we have a diverse group of people included in that. And we're looking at a group of 10. So there will be an application process open in early January for that. And so we want to make sure that that the information then is also brought through the Housing Commission before it gets brought to the Planning Commission, so that we follow advice and suggestions and recommendations and bring that forward to the Planning Commission. So all along, it's important to note that our biggest advisors is the public, and we'll get to public outreach here in a minute, but I just want to make that point early and clear. Next slide, please. The decision makers will be the City Council and HCD ultimately for our housing element update. The City Council will hopefully find their way to adopt a plan that gets brought through the advisory groups, and then it gets presented to HCD, whose role it is then to review for certification. There will be 2 rounds of review with HCD, so we'll be hopefully getting a plan together as early as the summer, make it available to the public, get it to HCD, hear about how we might make it better, and we'll talk a little more about deadlines later in the presentation. Next slide, please. So the key components of a housing element, we need to make sure we have an analysis of housing needs, and we're already beginning that in the background. We need an evaluation of constraints, an identification of sites and programs to meet the regional housing needs allocation. In the end, we'll have a housing plan, goals, policies, programs, and quantified objectives. And throughout the entire process, through the process of information gathering, synthesis, analysis, review, and further feedback, and then finally incorporation into our plan, we need to make sure we have a special focus on affirmatively furthering fair housing. This is a state law, and we'll talk about that next. And we'll be involving public engagement every step of the way. So this is just another way to look at the key components of specifically the housing needs analysis. We've already begun to analyze the data that we have available through various verifiable sources. We've begun assembling the data into discussion-focused reports that we'll be sharing with you and all of the advisory groups and the public at large. And that will, of course, lead to resources, programs, and strategies. Next slide, please.
Okay, I'm going to take over from here. As Andy mentioned, leading with equity is going to be a key component of the 6th cycle housing element update. And It is known as a new state law, AB 686. The name for it is Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing. It has a few important goals that will need to be addressed throughout the housing element process and the policy document itself, including addressing the significant disparities in housing needs and access to opportunity, replacing segregated living patterns with truly integrated and balanced living patterns, as well as fostering and maintaining compliance with civil rights and fair housing laws. In terms of the specific requirements of AB 686, one is that public agencies like the City of Cupertino have to look at what they've already done in past housing element cycles and other policy programs, and look at how they can create meaningful actions and proactive changes to promote more inclusive communities. And you're going to hear the phrase meaningful actions a lot. It needs to be tied into things that can be implemented effectively and are based on past programs and how to improve them. The second one of the other requirements of the law is to facilitate deliberate action that will explicitly address, combat, and relieve disparities resulting from the past patterns of segregation. So part of the assessment tools that we'll use to accomplish the goals of AB 686 include fair housing outreach and enforcement capacity discovery, analyzing the trends and patterns of past segregation and as well as integration, researching the disparities in access to opportunities, recognizing that there are disproportionate housing needs amongst the community members, and mitigating the risk of displacement. In terms of the data that is specific to Cupertino that relates to equity, this is showing the split of area median incomes between the households. And so you can see that a large proportion of Cupertino's population makes more than 100% of the area median income. And that proportion is higher than comparatively in Santa Clara County or within the Bay Area. In general, California is one of the most economically unequal states in the nation, and within California, Bay Area has the highest income inequality between high and low income households in the state. In terms of the cost burden by income level, so a household is considered cost burdened if it spends more than 30% of its monthly income on housing costs. And when someone spends more than 50% of their income on housing costs, that's what's considered severely cost burdened. In Cupertino specifically, we have about 13% of households who spend more than 50% of their income on housing. And let's see. And 75% of Cupertino households that make less than 30% of their area median income spend the majority of their income on housing. So there are a lot of other findings from the initial data, and some of the key findings are that there's the homeownership rate in Cupertino is about 60%. Between both renters and homeowners, the majority of both populations make more than 100% of the area median income. And the population growth is has been more significant in Cupertino when compared to the Bay Area and Santa Clara County. And the next portion, we're going to dig into the regional housing needs allocation. And This regional housing needs allocation is also known as the acronym RHNA, which you'll hear referred to a lot as RHNA. And what RHNA really is the target number of homes that Cupertino and other cities throughout California will need to plan for. And for Cupertino, that planning range is between 2023 and 2031. The RHNA is split between varying affordability levels, and the way that RHNA was assigned to Cupertino was from the California Department of Housing and Community Development. So when we look at Cupertino's numbers specifically, this is the breakdown between the various income levels. And you can see that we have a total of 4,588 units that Cupertino will need to plan for between 2023 and 2031. And one interesting thing to note as you look at the comparison in the two right-hand columns to Bay Area and Santa Clara is that if you compare the total RHNA numbers to the existing populations, the Santa Clara RHNA is about 7% of its current population, and Cupertino's RHNA of 4,500 or so is also 7% of the population. So there is proportional alignment there. And this this next graphic relates to the affordability levels and why it's split the way it is for RHNA, or at least it can give us a idea of how it's split. So you can see that the rent in Cupertino has risen fairly significantly in comparison to Santa Clara County and the Bay Area in the past 10 years or so. And then when we look at housing tenure by housing type, the blue here shows the owner-occupied units and the green shows the renter-occupied units. And so you can see that most of the people living in detached single-family homes are homeowners, whereas in comparison, 14.5% of households in multifamily housing own those. So it's just an interesting way to see the different types of housing people live in and whether they're renters or homeowners. And so now Andy is going to talk a little bit more about the sites inventory. Andy, are you there?
Thank you, Lauren. I had muted to make sure there was no background noise. I apologize. Thank you for that.
No problem.
So sites inventory. This is an exciting period of time for our housing element process, and it's maybe a time that that we wish we could take longer to come to a solution. We'll talk a little more about timing in a little bit, but what we need to know is that our first step here is in working with the community is with the sites inventory. For the sites inventory, the components are the identification of sites. So we need to know the general characteristics of suitable sites identified in the inventory, including zoning, infrastructure availability, and environmental constraints. We need to make sure that the sites can accommodate low, very low, extremely low income RHNA, which is a subcategory of very low RHNA. And with that, we need to include the analysis to determine if sites are appropriate to accommodate for each of those levels. Capacity analysis, we need to have a description of the methodology used to determine the number of units that can reasonably be developed on a site. For non-vacant sites, we need to analyze to make sure that they are appropriate and that displacement would be addressed proactively. And just generally, we need to make sure that the determination of adequate sites after consideration of our full analysis and any alternate methods to accommodate RENA, that the determination of whether sufficient sites exist to accommodate RENA or if there's a shortfall requiring a program to rezone additional sites. Next slide, please. So the background for the sites inventory, we will be working with the public to winnow down the sites that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Sure.
There you go.
Thank you very much. We'll be working with the public with our mapping program, and at the same time doing a deep dive with the sites that are emerging as those that we may be bringing forward through our advisory groups. And in our analysis, we'll be making sure that these sites would be zoned appropriately, either currently or as proposed with the zoning change, and that they would be available for residential use for the full 8-year planning period. So again, if there's not enough existing sites to accommodate the RENA for each income category, then the city will be considering identifying additional sites and or considering zoning changes to potential sites. Next slide, please. The strategies to identify additional sites could include changes to the city's general plan and or rezoning, or the other focus, of course, is to be looking at policies and programs and discovering what can promote the correct ratio of affordability for each of the RENA requirements. So these strategies are necessary to accommodate the full amount of housing needs allocated with RENA. Next slide, please. So we'll be looking at what sites we've used in the 4th and 5th cycle and determining whether these sites maybe were not developed because of barriers, including a zoning issue, and we'll be looking at the possibility of rezoning within 3 years to allow residential use by right with at least 30 dwelling units per acre for housing developments, which at least 20% of the units are affordable to lower income households. And this is actually the HCD requirement for those sites that we may be reusing in the 5th cycle. Next slide, please. So project schedules and key milestones. This graphic shows why we're looking at the site options early. We need to get to a place where we can determine whether or not a CEQA analysis will require an environmental impact report. If so, we need to make sure that our team has sufficient time for all of the reports, analysis, and strategies involved with such a detailed document. So therefore, we need to have our site option, our site plan, our site inventory analysis complete by early next year. Next slide, please. So the general process for doing this sites inventory analysis is that we begin with our data analysis, and then we also are including our public input that we'll be receiving from our mapping exercise. We'll then be bringing to City Council or Planning Commission and City Council to review the sites inventory. We'll have a public draft of the housing element released. The draft housing element will go to HCD. We're looking to the summer for that. A final housing element will then be produced through the end of the year. We'll bring it to the Planning Commission for recommendation, City Council for review and adoption, and then our final step is to submit that to HCD for certification. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Sandy, for going through those key milestones and the process. I'm going to take it over from here to talk about the public engagement process. So our community engagement plan is going to be robust and diverse, and our process of review is really going to be transparent and inclusive. We'll be maximizing our opportunities to use both high tech and ways that meet people where they are, so that we can reach as many people as possible. We want our final housing element plan to reflect the community goals and ideas, and we just want to reiterate that the local power really resides in determining how Cupertino will come together to find solutions for this housing element update. And with that, there are many ways that the public can participate and have their voices heard in public meetings like right now. The website engagecupertino.org/housing element has a lot of different ways that the public can interact and provide feedback. We have a slide that will talk about that more specifically. That includes the Cupertino Housing Simulator, which is a mapping exercise where you can show where you'd like to see housing, but you also have to put your planning hat on a little bit and figure out, how it's all going to work to make it a success. We also have community workshops where we'll be at tonight from 6 to 8 p.m. So we highly encourage you all to attend. As Andy talked about, we're going to be looking into stakeholder representation and other targeted outreach methods. So this is a little bit more about the Engage Cupertino housing element page. This is a screenshot from the page, and you can see that we've have it available in 5 different languages. And at the bottom, we have a quick poll tool, which you can, immediately see the results of, and you can share your ideas. You also have a direct link to the simulator, and you can subscribe to stay informed. And as I mentioned earlier, the Cupertino Housing Simulator is a way for Cupertino community members to really be an ambassador and choose which areas of the city you'd like to see future housing built. And you can also, we'll be making future iterations of the tool so that you can come back and provide more feedback as we go along our process. And this is a screenshot of what the current Cupertino housing simulator looks like right now. We'll be able to go into it in a lot more detail at tonight's workshop, but you can see at the top there is a progress bar, and as you click and choose which areas you'd like to see housing in, that progress bar will go up until you've reached the total arena of 4588. And in that last map, you could see that the current iteration of the mapping exercise is focused on both the special areas here, which these boundaries have been established by the city, as well as neighborhoods that have also been recognized by the city. And a little bit more detail about tonight's community workshop. It'll be a brief introduction to the housing element update like you've heard about today. We'll dive a little bit deeper into the sites inventory analysis. We'll give our timeline and the rationale between focusing on sites first. And we'll also begin to talk about the distribution for future housing and show people how to use Balancing Act, which we've also been calling the Cupertino Housing Simulator. And now I'm going to turn it over to Andy for some feedback and discussion from the commissioners.
Thank you, Lauren.
Do we want to go over this
Yep.
slide first? Okay.
Yes. So with next steps, as Lauren mentioned, we've got tonight's community workshop. We're hoping that all of you will attend and share this information with your neighbors and friends. And we also are working with a list of potentially eligible property owners. And we also have a form for property owners who are interested in their property, including housing in the future. So we've got that available on our website. I think it was included in the screenshot that Lauren shared with us. And we may in the new year talk a little bit about the Heart of the City specific plan update if we discover that that is appropriate as part of our process here. And the stakeholder ad hoc group selection will be happening in early to late January. Next slide, please. So discussion topics that we want to open the floor to, and of course we're open to others, but we thought we would just give a primer of concepts that we would welcome discussion about. Are there particular housing strategies that the city should consider to meet its affordable housing needs and RHNA requirements? Are there ideas for increasing inclusion in our outreach efforts? And are there housing issues or concerns that should be addressed that maybe we wouldn't know about through ways other than hearing from you or the public? Next slide, please. I think that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we're open to additional questions and feedback. And Connie, we look to you for guidance about who might speak first.
I was muted. I wanted to thank you for that really nice presentation. It's going to be very helpful, especially for those who have, this is their first foray into getting this information. And I know we all have questions, certainly I do. And since you have finished a little bit earlier, that does help because we have 14 members of the public. And I would encourage the public, if they want to speak, you'll be speaking right after the commissioners, between two sets of commissioner questions. So please be raising your hands so that we can call on you and know how many that are going to be wanting to speak. But for now, I will open it to the commissioners to speak. I can't see everyone because of the shared thing. Do you want to? Can you take that down, or do you need to have that up? Do you think?
Andy, are you okay if I take it down?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Let's stop sharing.
Oops. Okay.
Okay. So has.
There we go.
Okay. Speak right up, commissioners. I cannot see your hands. Being Sue Bose, would you like to start? I'm just gonna put it out there. Would you like to ask a question now?
Sure. I wanted to thank both of them for their presentation. We really appreciate it. And we know that it's going to be a gargantuan task for the city to meet its housing element needs as put forth by RHNA. And my question to you is, how involved are you going to be as consultants throughout the process? Are you going to be there just in the beginning of the process? Are you guys going to be able to hold the city's hands and lead us through the process? And the second part to the question is, how confident are you that the city can get somewhere close towards meeting its RHNA numbers? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bose. Thank you for that question. We are dedicated to sticking with you through the entire process. We intend to, you mentioned hold your hand. Absolutely. We walk this walk together. Absolutely. And we have the benefit of an incredible staff who are just a pleasure to work with, and we're able to do great things together. I have no doubt that that we will be. You ask if we're confident. Yes, I do feel confident that we'll be able to walk through these steps together and get to a place with a document that HCD can review and feel that it meets their needs. That is our goal. And even if that doesn't happen with our first draft with HCD, we will learn from any feedback that they give us, and we will fold that into our process. And our goal is to make the deadline of January of 2023 with a fully adopted and certified housing element update.
So a follow-up to that would be having an update. Are we going to be able to identify all the sites by then, or is that going to happen over the 8-year time period?
Well, we're sort of in a fast track right now. We really need to identify sites within the next 2 months. That's why we're rolling out this workshop as quickly as we can. We need to at least generally have a concept of where the housing capacity, where generally the community would like to see the housing, and then where our decision makers can accept future housing as capacity throughout the city, so that we can then get busy working on making sure that all of our environmental impact report documentation can be aligned with those general locations.
Okay, I do have one other question. One of my concerns is that whenever we are putting in high density housing in certain areas, the chances are there may not be enough parking, and or the residents of those units may not have access to transport, their own personal transport. In that situation, is the city addressing the concern that public transport is available to those high density housing units?
That's a great question. And this is a question that we're hearing from most of the communities that we're working in. These two ideas certainly go hand in hand. The idea of a higher density than single family, along with transit needs. And I think that's partly why this RENA allocation comes not only from the Association of Bay Area Governments, but also from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. And so there are incentives for having a certified housing element, and one of those incentives are transportation grants. So these two concepts need to be considered throughout the process, and then as you're suggesting, into the future. It's sort of a chicken and egg, because where there's a rail line, there will be higher density housing, because there's that predictability that transportation will be available. But the other piece of it, the other side of it is a transit line might not be increased if they're not certain that ridership will happen. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg, but we will keep the concept of where transportation is available, and therefore where parking could potentially be minimized, so that we're designing for people and for rather than cars. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that information.
Thank you.
And lots of good luck to you guys moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank
We're
you.
in this together.
Yeah. And I would like to ask Govind if he wants to have a comment or a question at this time.
Thank you, Connie.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Connie, for the opportunity, and thank you to EMC for an excellent presentation. First, I think public would like to know: is there a way that we are going to have? Are you going to share your slides? Okay.
Yes. We will be sharing.
Go ahead, Andy.
Oh, yes, we'll be sharing it on the website.
Okay. Second,
It will also be part of the record on the minutes for the meeting as well, under communicate or under presentations.
Okay. So second is that you mentioned about that you are going to fast track it within 2 months, and I wanted to understand how many public engagement sessions we might have in terms of workshops, and will the stakeholders have to be included, and by what time they will be included?
That's a great question. Our demonstration tonight will be to share how to use our tool, the mapping tool. And this is just a great direct democracy tool that allows people with all different kinds of motivations for helping to determine locations where housing can go. And then the idea is we'll continue to roll out additional maps based on what feedback we received from this first cycle. So the idea is that it will be a continuation of sort of workshops at home, meaning we'll, for those who subscribe and for all of the other media outlets, we'll be notifying people when additional maps are available and ready for further participation. So the idea is that first we're starting very broad as far as looking at the entire city as a whole. And then as we see the patterns and understand better the strategies that are coming out of this initial map, then we'll just become more and more detailed. But rather than having a public workshop to unveil each and every map, people will be able to jump into the process and learn about the tool even after this workshop, because it will be recorded and available.
I have another question. I mean, there was this proportionality in terms of city and the county, 7%, I guess. So for that, when you use the data in terms of, do you use population density and the housing stock currently available? And the second question is it based on census data, or do you have something more recent than that?
Yes, we're looking at census data, and this was just I'm sorry, I didn't hear the middle question. The question about the comparative analysis.
No, the thing is essentially that when you, I believe you must be looking at both population as well as the housing stock currently available. So where do you get the data from, and what's the most recent data that how does the public know about the most recent data? That's
Yes, and we'll be sharing our data and our data analysis with the public, including all of the source information. So anybody who wants to understand what the source of our analysis is, that will all be publicly available, but it is census data that we're looking at for population.
Okay. Second, the next question is related to what Sue had asked. I hope I have a chance to ask this question. So there are two intermediary bodies between HCD and the city. So it's the ABAG and the MTC. Of course, in ABAG, you can't have all the 101 cities represented. So we have a proportional representation. In terms of MTC, what I would like to understand is what was the special projects they undertook in the city as to and what they plan to do for the next cycle.
I might have a slightly bad connection. I heard most of that, but there was a
okay.
So you'd like to know what MTC is doing for this cycle and for next cycle as far as transportation grants?
Transportation grants, yes.
Oh, okay. That's a great question. We'd be happy to get back to you on that. That's not something that we have folded into our analysis yet, but we could probably find some links to help you understand and learn about that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Govind. We'll have a little more time after the public input as well. I don't know if Tessa can actually ask questions now. So, he's there. Hi, Tessa.
I'm back in my office. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I just had a question that might not be relevant to this meeting, but I thought I'd ask it in case it needs research for the future. And I know it's been discussed a lot. As mentioned in the presentation, Cupertino does not build the housing. We can only, they can only propose and plan and that whatnot. Mm-hmm. In light of that, in light of the fact that some developers have applied and then not built, and is there a constitutionally correct way to control that? Say, you know, if the cycle is every year, 8 years, is it possible to limit and give an approval with the condition that they build within 4 years, say? You know, not just hold on and sit on to the permits. A lot of the permits that were approved were meeting our goals and then they just sat on them. And in a sense, you know, some developers are sitting on property and limiting others from building because they're not selling and they're not building themselves. And considering, you know, the housing needs are so drastic, just wondered if that was part of something that we could propose as a final product as we come towards the end of the this process, that we could have some kind of solution to that problem.
Well, thank you for that question, Commissioner Parrish. And this is the kind of analytical thinking that we need absolutely as we step into the policy part of our analysis. So thank you for this. We'll definitely keep this in mind, and we'll be looking at the housing permitting process and making sure, like you're suggesting, that there would be potentially expiration dates if there aren't already. Maybe that's something to look at through the policy analysis process. And we'll also be looking at potential barriers that that property owners might see in their desire to build more housing. Some things that maybe the city aren't aware of, but could remedy through this policymaking process. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tessa. And I will go ahead and ask a few questions now, and then we'll engage the public, and hopefully Siva will be able to join us for the second round of comments at the end of the meeting. What I would like to ask first, one of the questions you said when you handed it off to us, Andy, was about getting people involved. And as I understand it, it's not just necessary, it's not limited to residents giving their feedback to this tool. And so I think since one of the things that we're trying to do is to improve the number of affordable housing in our area, that we reach out to, say, the employees of the businesses that employees that currently work in Cupertino, whether they're teachers, whether they're hospitality workers, government workers, whoever, they're working in our city, reach out to them and ask them what affordability they need or what location they need, because they're the people that we're looking to have closer to their work, and which will ameliorate some of the traffic conditions and that kind of thing. So if you could add that to your outreach, I think that would be very important.
Thank you. That's a great point. Absolutely.
Okay, so that's my number one question. Another question was when you're talking about very low income, that covers 0 to 50%. And there is the extremely low income, which is 0 to 30%, which is included within that. And I had read in the law that how HCD is interpreting it is that the cities do need to plan for ELI specifically. And I do understand that there's a significant issue on how ELI is built and funded and all that. But my understanding was that that's actually a requirement. So could you speak to that?
That is definitely part of our process going forward in doing our needs analysis. Absolutely. And we will be following HCD guidance. And as you mentioned, yes, the extremely low income is a subcategory of the very low income. So the numbers that we see in that chart, they are inclusive of that. And it will definitely be part of our process and then incorporated into the final, well, first the draft and then the final housing element.
Okay. Let's see, 9:54, we still have time. You were saying that there is a way for people to submit ideas for properties to be reviewed. I noticed in the way it was set up right now that property owners can put their property in, but not somebody who notices something's for sale and says, oh, that looks nice. Maybe you guys could consider that. So is there a way for people to submit those kinds of ideas?
I love that idea. I think that's a great idea. We can brainstorm about how we might incorporate that into our website. We do have some other mapping opportunities, ways that we could enable people to sort of drop a pin in a map, if that would be a comfortable way for people to share that kind of information.
Okay.
And even now, though, if somebody has that kind of idea, they can throw it into our ideas board.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, if you don't want to wait, if you've got some, hot topic, that you want to share with us, please do. Please do.
Okay, so we can use that share ideas button in the Engage Cupertino link that you gave us.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's great. So that's good to hear. I did want to ask one more question. This has more to do with the way that we're reaching out in our Engage Cupertino link. Right there under housing element, there's 2 paragraphs, and at the end of the second paragraph, it talks about wanting to be careful of the character of our neighborhoods. Now, affirmatively furthering, excuse me, affirmative action specifically talks to reaching out to other people and basically changing perhaps the kinds of housing that we have available. And I'm wondering if that particular terminology is a little off-putting because it has some roots, in the way general plans have been written in the past. And I don't think that that's what we would want to have in the perception of people reading our link. So I would ask you to please say something else, I guess. And I think I did in fact send in some words that I thought would work better, but I can't get them to mind right this minute. I'm better when I'm writing those things, and I did submit that. So I would like to suggest that. Let's see.
If it pleases the chair, I do have your language right in front of me if you'd like me to read it.
Okay, sure.
I see that your suggested wording is, we will plan for this growth in a way that will welcome new neighbors and share the many benefits of living in this beautiful city of Cupertino.
Yeah, I mean, I like it, but so if that works for you or for any, then that just taking away the whole idea that new neighbors are going to somehow impact our character in some negative way. So thank you. I'm glad that you got that. And I guess one thing, let's see, it's getting to be 9:57. Perhaps I'll just save this other comment for after our public participation. I'm going to look over here and see, we have 5 hands raised for the attendees, and I would encourage the attendees if they would raise their hands so that we can call on them. And I will just mention to Carrie that for whatever reason, my Zoom does not show the raised hands, just how many raised hands there are. So if I could ask you to call on the people. And since I think we have a little more time than we thought we did, because it's now 10 o'clock. And I had thought the presentation would be just ending. So I think we can allow the 3 minutes for our speakers. And so we can start that now.
Sure, I can go ahead and manage the public comments for you. We currently have 7 folks, and I'm going to go in the order received, and there's a 3-minute timer, so I'll go ahead and set that too. So first we're going to allow Jenny Griffin to speak. Good morning.
Thank you, Carrie. I appreciate all the information that our housing element contract group is providing us. As I mentioned in the previous meetings with the city, with this housing element is going to be one for the ages. I've been through 2 housing elements with the city, and this one is loaded with everything. I will tell you, I think the contracting group has done a fantastic job, but I sent off 4 messages to the Planning Commission. I CC'd them to the Housing, I CC'd them to the City Council, because I have some very, very grave questions about terms that are being used, advisory groups, people who may not live in the city or may have too many outside interests from funding groups. that they're being paid to, I'm sorry, I'm going to throw it all out here because this is we're into World War II. We have potential influences from people that are being paid as lobbyists from landowners, funding groups who are pushing for upzoning because their properties will be increased. I will tell you right now that I want to know why or who is on this housing element stakeholder group. I demand to know. We don't need a stakeholder group. We went through this with the Matrix project 10 years ago, and we fought this through with the stuff going on in the city of San Jose for those, whatever they're called, where they upzone everything. I really do not want this to start in the city because everyone's voice is as good as everyone else. I never heard of AB 868. I want to know what it is. If the governor signed it, he sure didn't tell me about it. And I am not going to go quietly into this if I do not know what this legislation is. And I sure want to know what legislator wrote AB 868, because if they're from Southern California and I never heard of it, then that stuff needs to be pulled immediately. I'm very, very concerned about where HCD and MTC and ABAG are going with this because, you know, my goals in this are to try to remain as neutral and as calm as possible. But I can see the battle lines for tonight coming up. And I am really tired of having my voice in this state be suppressed. I'm tired of being told I'm not good enough to live in my city. Yeah, I have never, my entire life buying my home and renting an apartment, I always paid more than 30% for my living arrangements. You know, it's not us. So I'm trying to be very, very calm here, but
we are at time. We're at time. I'll let you finish.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I'm trying, we're going to have to ride this out like everything we ever did, and don't mess with Heart of the City. Thank you.
Thank you.
A question to Andy Flower or Lauren. Can you answer the question about the stakeholder group? Because I saw that in your presentation, and maybe a short thing about the AB 686. I might have got that number wrong, 868.
686, you got it right the
Okay.
first time. Yes. So the stakeholder group will be recruiting for that in the new year, and we'll be making sure that announcement gets out far and wide. We're looking to include 10 people who could be representative of different aspects of the community, as you mentioned before, Chair. The idea of making sure that teachers and employees, people who maybe even work at the city, who may not live at the city but they would like to, and we're looking for a cross-section, a diverse representation of people, so that we can elevate those voices up for those who are the ones to be served eventually by the housing element goals and policies.
Okay, thank you. And AB 686, can you just give a brief statement about that? If that's AFFH,
It is AFFH. So it is this same idea that those who may have not been part of a policymaking process for housing in the past, and subsequently their needs may be not considered through the policymaking process and through establishing the locations for where future housing could be made room for. It's now time to include them in as many ways possible. So we're doing that through the website, and we'd like to also bring in an advisory group representative of a diversity of perspectives.
okay,
they will not have ultimate decision-making authority, certainly, and but their opinions and ideas would bubble up through the advisory and then decision-making boards and commissions.
Thank you very much for helping answer those questions for our public. Okay, Carrie, do you want to go to the next person, please?
Yes, so next we have Jan Stokley, and I'm going to start allow you to talk and start the timer. Good morning, Jan.
Sorry, this is Sujatha Venkatraman. I got an unmute.
Okay, and Jan's hand went, okay, my list switched. Sujatha, I'm going to mute you. I'll come back to you and I'll open up Jan. Thank you.
Thanks. I must have lowered my hand before you called on me. Sorry. I'm Jan Stokley, Executive Director of Housing Choices. We have been advocating for more than 5 years in Cupertino for affordable housing that includes some extremely low-income units for people with developmental disabilities. There are several hundred people with developmental disabilities in Cupertino. More than 70% are living at home with aging parents, and as their parents become unable to house them because of their own aging, we're seeing them being displaced from Cupertino. So the numbers are just declining, not because they're getting housed, but because they're getting displaced. So developmental disabilities is a category that's required to be addressed in the housing element, and we have some data that we'd love to share with the consultants. And we also have policy and program recommendations that are pretty specific to this particular community. But in general, I just want to emphasize and applaud the work of the consultants in lifting up the issue of the need for extremely low-income housing in Cupertino. Because the area median income keeps going up in Santa Clara County every year, more and more people are being pushed into the extremely low-income category, and the rents are getting higher and higher. And that's definitely true of people with disabilities. We've also seen that there's a correlation between extremely low income and BIPOC, people of color, and then disabilities. And so we feel it would be, especially in Cupertino, where geographically the whole city is a community of opportunity, we feel that one of the strongest ways you could affirmatively further fair housing, addressing both the categories of race and disability, is by having very specific policies and programs to create extremely low-income housing. So we're just eager and interested to provide data and make policy recommendations, and want to thank you for lifting up the discussion about ELI. I think it's really important in all of Santa Clara County, but particularly in Cupertino. So thank you.
Thank you. Give me 1 second, meeting management.
Chair, if I can just say that we certainly welcome that data and policy recommendations as public comment, and I'm certain that Carrie will forward that to us.
Sure, and then we will now have Sujatha. Thank you we'll give it a second try. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Sujatha Venkatraman from West Valley Community Services. I wanted to take the time to thank Andy and his group for the work that they are doing. West Valley is involved with their team. And so we are very excited that we are bringing the voices of our community in this process. I also want to take the opportunity here to actually introduce Kylie Clark, our public policy coordinator. She's new, and I wanted the housing commissioners to know about her. She will be in later to speak on the item, but Kylie is working on a number of policy issues, and we have a blog post and an update on our website, which we are using as a way to educate the community. So I will let Kylie speak more on that, but thank you all. We are super excited of the work and the partnership that we have in Cupertino. As you all know, West Valley Community Services is advocating for affordable, inclusive, and fair housing in our city. So thank you very much.
Next, we have Scott Connolly. Good morning.
Hi there. Good morning, everybody. First, want to just say excellent presentation. This is a challenging and somewhat scary process that you're going through, given the limited capacity of land in Cupertino, and just to appreciate the opportunity to speak. I had a couple of quick questions, and they may be drilling down too far where it's not appropriate to answer them at this time, but a couple of quick questions. I'd be curious to understand if any of the folks on the call have a sense of how the Valco development will impact the 4,500 units that are needed in this current RHNA cycle. Obviously, it's a huge development. I know it's not all residential, but it would be interesting to understand what kind of a dent in that 4,500 unit number Valco would be anticipated to make. I'd also be curious to understand how many of the units towards the 4,500 will be considered reused units from, say, the RHNA 5 cycle that have not been built, because those are obviously units that would create less stress in finding new sites because they can be reused. So I'd be interested if there's a number associated with that. And then lastly, I'd be curious about the city's thoughts on when the ultimate site list gets submitted to the state will review that site list. And I think it's a new requirement in this RHNA 6 cycle, where the state will look more onerously at the ability of sites to be developed. And so my question is regarding, I think the two biggest challenges for redevelopment of a site are for a site that currently is occupied. So potential lease encumbrances, that would be tenant leases and option terms that run past the 8 years. And then for properties that are, say, undeveloped, letters of support from those landowners saying that they are willing to have their property be a part of this, because ultimately their properties will be in essence rezoned to housing. And so I'm just curious, the city's approach as they identify sites, will they be going to owners that have existing leases and confirming that there are no leases that run out that would prohibit development? Because a real unfortunate situation would be to submit and go through this whole process and have the community understand these are the sites. And then, but
10 more seconds, please.
Before the state to come back and say, no, there's 600 sites we're going to reject. And so you've got to start over, because there's a CEQA bus that will leave the train station as well relative to that list. So thank you very much. You guys are doing a great job and appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, I will now call on Lisa Warren. Good morning.
Good morning. I am not in a position where I could write down what I was thinking along the way, so I'm going to miss some things and I may sound really scattered, but I think it's really important when we're going to get down to having to rezone if we really need to meet these numbers. That, I don't think that's a question. And I think it's important to remember that we can't rezone all solid housing. We has become a retail desert. We bring more people in. If there isn't appropriate transit, which there is not now, we have more people that need transit that they don't have. We have essential retail that cannot go away, and we need more of it. We need more of it with the current population, and we need to account for that when the rezoning decisions are made. So that always gets lost. It gets talked about and agreed to, but then it just kind of goes away. Or it gets, developers get quote unquote away with not doing it. And I know it's not an easy thing to do because you don't know what retail you're going to get there. We absolutely don't need any more restaurants. We need what people need on a daily basis for essential living, not luxury living. Stakeholders. Annie, I think you used the word recruit, and I'm not going to bash that word. I just want to understand what that means, because we have in the past had unknown stakeholders. They're just listed as stakeholders. People can't get real answers on what they are. And when they dig down and fight to get those answers, it's very unsatisfying, because this isn't just about, and I appreciate your comment about trying to reach people and Connie's request that, you know, are going to be in these potential units. But you can't forget about the community that's existing and what their thoughts are. So I'm raising my hand right now to be on whatever list this is. So I need to know how to apply to do that. And I really would like to know understand the recruiting definition, and you don't need to do it now. I think it's probably better than it sounded, but I hope so. And as far as transit and parking, you know, that despite that,
please finish please finish your comments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
You can finish your thought.
Well, I don't want that to be an excuse for not dispersing housing everywhere in the city, everywhere. Not how it's been for the past forever years, everywhere. Because if you have it done correctly and there's essential retail where it needs to be, and there's communities within these new developments that can work out arrangements for themselves to get where they need to be, and just to make our community more well-rounded in every corner.
Thank you. We have 3 more public speakers. We have Leanna Crabtree, Janet Van Zorn, and Kylie Clark. I'm going to call on Leanna Crabtree. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you so much to staff for your presentation, and thank you to commissioners for your service. I appreciate the discussion this morning. My name is Leanna Crabtree. I'm a Cupertino resident. The beginning of this discussion opened with the premise, this understanding that we're all supposed to nod our heads in agreement to, and that is that the city does not build housing. And what we've seen is really decades of the federal government and the state government just taking a real hands-off approach, stepping back from the responsibility to house people adequately and stably for long terms who are in a position where they cannot afford market rate. We have instead this idea that private development will step in and build the housing that we need. But in fact, private development builds the housing that it wants to build, that it determines to be most profitable. So we get housing that doesn't necessarily match what our community needs. We get housing, we get studio apartments, you've euphemistically described as junior 1-bedrooms of 350 square feet, you know, for upwards of $3,000 and $4,000 in Santa Clara County. And anybody who needs housing that requires or anybody who has requirements of, they need care, they're young children, they're seniors with limited capacity, or anyone with any kind of disability, we're not seeing that kind of housing be built. And we're seeing that housing is completely decoupled from what people can actually afford to pay. Instead, it's priced against what investors can pay. And so I challenge you, commissioners who serve at the pleasure of your council, to please push back and look for ways for a city to build its own housing. When you look at what's happening worldwide in terms of turning this sort of terrible investor market for this precious resource of housing, it's happening at the city level. The pushback is happening at the city level. The state isn't going to come in, the federal government isn't going to come in. We're going to get a lot of presentations about reasons why we can't have housing. Meanwhile, Santa Clara County, as you are so well aware, has 10,000 people inadequately housed or unhoused, and far more probably living with the fear of that. Just a couple of comments. I appreciate that you're going to be sharing your slides. There were 2 of the slides that were graphs that don't mention the locale. I appreciate this is a presentation from Cupertino, but nowhere on the slide does it actually say that you're measuring something in Cupertino. There's no locale mentioned at all. And there's specifically the ones I spotted, but there may be others, were ones titled cost burdened, and then also housing tenure by housing type. If you could please add that you're talking about Cupertino. There's a lot of data on those graphs, and maybe a little bit of explanatory text would be very helpful as well. Also, I want to second Chair Cunningham's edit.
More seconds, please.
Right, to AB 686, that language, I liked the welcoming language. I think it was much more effective and better reflects our community. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Now we will move on. 2 more speakers. We have Janet Van Zoren. Good morning.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just have a few comments. First of all, I really appreciate the presentation this morning and how well you've conveyed what the process is, and you sort of opened this up to the community. I'd like to reinforce what Jan Stokley said about the needs of the special needs population here in the community. I'd like to also comment about the ELI as being part of the VLI category. I think Cupertino ought to take it out of the VLI category and address it as a category in its own right, because it gets lost in the VLI category, especially since it's so difficult for developers to produce. And so I think it needs to be addressed specifically. I'd also like to say, with regard to transportation, I hope that this process will involve in some way some dialogue with VTA, because over the years, the VTA has diminished its coverage and diminished the frequency with which it covers its routes. And I would hate to see us restricting where we're looking for housing because there's no VTA transit in those areas. We should also be looking at the possibility of putting in some small transit hubs in other areas of the city, again, so that we can spread out this housing throughout the community. But definitely there needs to be some dialogue with VTA and hopefully some commitments from them. And my last point is just a technical one. I really appreciated the fact that you used very few acronyms in your presentation, and I would encourage you to not use acronyms in your future presentations, because that's the best way, I think, to lose community input, is to talk with too many acronyms that those of us in the public not specializing in housing don't understand. And the same thing when you talk about a bill, if you could, or new law, if you could briefly describe what that is when you mention it, it would be wonderful. Thanks again.
Thank you. Okay, and for the benefit of the public, we have our last speaker. So we will close public comment if there are no more hands received by the time the 3 minutes is up for the last speaker, okay? So I'm going to open it up to our last public comment. Kylie Clark, good morning.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kylie Clark. I was introduced earlier by Sujatha. I'm lucky enough to have met many of you, but like she said, I'm the public policy coordinator at West Valley Community Services, and I'm still relatively new. I've been here for about 3 months, but I definitely dove right in, especially with everything happening with the housing element. So I want to share a little bit about how WVCS is involved in this process and has been so far. First is just me attending meetings like this and really any other relevant meetings happening around the housing element, like council study sessions and planning commission meetings and things like that. And we have also been meeting regularly with EMC, so with Andy and Lauren and a couple of other members of their team. And we've been working to connect them with our clients. So that's something that we're really excited about. And we're really grateful for that partnership, because this space is often pretty inaccessible for the people who are actually going to hopefully be the most impacted by it if we're able to do this right and really get some affordable housing. And then I also chair a committee called the Client Advisory Committee at West Valley Community Services, and we're working to get more clients on board, but what we will have is a group of dedicated clients who are interested in advocacy and who also advise us based on their lived experience. And I'll just say a little bit about what we'd like to see for the housing element, but really, we're really happy with the direction that y'all are going in, and I really appreciate all of the work that you're doing on this. We'd love to see some more focus on affordability, just trying to get above that 20%, because really in the community, that's where the biggest need is. Like that graph showed how disproportionate the housing is as stands. And we also really appreciate the focus that there's been, and I think will continue to be, on equity and social justice. It's really great to see that incorporated into this process. And so really just continue doing what you're doing, and we appreciate everything. And we're also here as a resource if you ever need any help or want to be connected with our clients or anything like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Chair Cunningham, that officially closes out public comments. I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you to all of the public who came out in this early morning to speak to us and to share your insights. It's really valuable. It's great for the EMC team to hear all of you as well. So I just was going to encourage you to come to tonight's meeting at 6 o'clock about the mapping tool, because that is a method for people to become involved. Okay, so thank you again for coming and speaking. I appreciate it very much. Now I'm going to turn it back to the commissioners if they have some last comments that they would make. And since it's 10:30, I was hoping that we have enough time to do 2 minutes with questions and comments. If you would like to go around again, can I see a raised hand from any of our commissioners? I see 2. So on my screen, Govind's at the top. Govind, would you like to go first, please?
Thank you, Chair. So I do want to talk about this ELI and VLI. There was a very important observation made that we need to separate these categories. And then there was also a comment about people who are both developmentally disabled as well as people who have other disabilities. So is there a way that we can have a breakdown in terms of ELI and VLI with respect to those who fall into that category in terms of income, as well as who fall into that category based on other factors? Because that mix, in understanding of that mix, is very important for us to make sure that the housing stock that is being recommended is kind of addressing the problem of the community. And it cannot be a very general information, because that makes no sense. I mean, we have to do it by city. So that's one thing which I would like to see if there's a way to gather that information. And the other is that there was also observation about dialogue with the VTA. Is that something where you people, because most of my understanding is that the focus of, in terms of public engagement, is going to be mostly about housing character and housing stock and stuff like that. Would you be also addressing transit issues? Because there's a lot of within the community, the ability for us to get off the car and use public transit depends on availability, and we haven't seen much of a progress. Every time they talk about something, it's all about Highway 85, and Highway 85 is definitely not solving all the issues that Cupertino needs to address. So we would like to see if there's a way to kind of stoke that discussion during your public engagement process. That's pretty much my inputs. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Govind. Tessa?
Yes, thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. I wanted to speak to something that one of the speakers commented, or the public commented about, and that was the Jenny Griffin's comment about who requested the panel, the council that is being recruited for. I'd like to know as well, only because while it sounds like a great idea because you want to have representation from different people, and it sounds very democratic, it also has the strong possibility that someone chooses someone to be there and there is excess effort. And I understand that they don't have the last word, and it isn't, but it does carry a lot more weight when you say the panel suggested, and now they have more ideally representing more people, and or their whoever it is that they're representing. So I too feel like it has a possibility of going wrong and possibly representing incorrectly. I think that this outreach plan to reach everyone would probably be more equitable. And everything I've seen that you're going for using technology and surveys and whatnot, I think we should work on getting that out more, and with that, acquiring the voices that you're looking for, diversity and representation. I would rather see that as an equal, we all have an equal voice, and that it brings it up. Otherwise, it almost has a feeling that that person has more weight or more knowledge, and like it was said, who recruits them, who decides, how are they recruited, and who gets the picked. But more so, I would like to know who's requiring that panel, to see if it's something we can eliminate. I would really like to see that. It does seem a little funky to me. And then the other was Leanna Crabtree's comment about the city having its own housing. And someone reminded me that back in the day, there was public housing and people could depend on that. Other countries have it. Denmark, I have a close friend, he goes, people, our government provides some type of housing. No one has to go. They have very little unhoused people there. And so I wanted to second that idea that maybe Cupertino, with all the land it owns, or it could own, put together a housing element of its own that it could have and maintain, and not personally maintain, because I know that has to be outsourced. That's all. Thank you.
Can you address the question that Tessa asked in regards to the stakeholder group? Is that required by the housing element process itself? Or is that, because I thought that's what it was, but I think it's good for people to understand a little bit more about that stakeholder process.
Thank you for this opportunity, Chair. The stakeholder group is an attempt to enable those who are or have been disenfranchised in the past. And these are groups that maybe wouldn't have the kind of direct democracy numbers otherwise afforded to representation through the policy making process. So to get directly to your answer, HCD is not requiring a stakeholder group. However, having a stakeholder group is definitely aligned with efforts for a more equitable process, because it can elevate those voices whose numbers are likely less than those who typically participate in the process. Because if this is a new process for an individual who is well, in one instance, maybe a low-income individual, if they're working several jobs and have not, or even just one single job, that they may not have the time, energy, motivation, or experience that could lead them to this opportunity. So it's one path for helping to level the playing field, helping that direct democracy to be more equitable. So while it's not required by HCD, it's likely that HCD would look favorably upon this path. I hope that helps.
Could I just ask a follow-on question about that? Because when I read the earlier description of the stakeholder group, I thought it also included business representatives, perhaps. And so just so it's a fuller, well, anyway, it sounded like it's got a number of different, absolutely including the folks that you're talking about, but also including business. But unless that's changed or something. And I also understand that there's a process where you're putting it out electronically, but it's the city council who is going to be approving it.
We haven't finalized all of the details about who would be approving it. We are hoping to make it both electronically available as an application and also paper available. And as far as business owners, not all business owners are super wealthy or have plenty of time to spend on policy making decisions, but they are heavily impacted when it comes to employing people and whether or not people who they want to have employed have a safe and reasonable distance to their home from the location that they're trying to hire people.
Thank you. I clearly needed to have that clarified for me. Thank you. So I think, let's see, I don't see, oh, Sue, do you have your hand up? Please, go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to put a word in to support Leanna Crabtree and Tessa's suggestion of maybe the city needs to look into putting in their own housing, especially for low and extremely low income units, because there is very little incentive for builders to do so, and the numbers may not work for the builders. So just in the interest of public, for the public that needs to be served, I think maybe the city needs to look into that. Just wanted to give a plug to that thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I will take a couple of minutes to wrap up a couple of questions that I had. One was, what I noticed that you put the Housing Commission in your chart. And as I understand it, we are what the housing element process considers a housing advisory committee. And so as I looked at your spreadsheet and so forth, it looked like that we're going to be involved occasionally in the review of the documents, but at the end, towards the end, it looks like we're not involved with the Planning Commission and the council are. So maybe we could clarify that at some point as to what the Housing Advisory Committee duties are and when we're going to be involved in the review of any products that come out of this. So you don't have to do it now, but it's just something that I would like to have clarified so that our commission knows we're going into a new year. There's a new city work program, all that. What are we doing with this so that we know how to budget our time? And I think that was my last question. So given
do we have, Connie, do we have time? Do I have time for to make another quick comment following?
Yeah, I was going to close it off at 10:40. So yeah, you have a minute.
Okay. Yeah. So in light of the fact that, you know, if it is encouraged or agreed upon that the stakeholder is a plan and is a go, I would like to see a lot more transparency in the process, but also make sure and approval from the Housing Commission and Council of who's on there, because with full transparency on who they are and their connections. I would like to really, really make sure that those business owners don't result in manipulation of, the big developers and drowning out the common folk. That is the purpose that you mentioned, Andy, of the people that wouldn't have otherwise, but really encourage them to come out and speak, empower them. I would really like to see them speak. That would be what I'd like. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And I thank all of the commissioners for your thoughtful comments about this process as well.
Connie, can I have 1 minute if you don't mind?
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. So first, I want to second what exactly Tessa said. I think she also mentioned the same thing. I definitely second the idea that stakeholders' information needs to be made more transparent and public. And the second thing is that if, as part of the the public engagement, you can also ask the requirement in terms of transit hubs and what kind of transit, local transit, they would like to see, because even if the retail is going to be at certain place, located in a certain place, they have to go to the retail. Everybody cannot bike. Everybody cannot, do like walk to that distance, because it all depends on the mix. So we need also some input in terms of what kind of transit hubs are probably the people need in the city. That's pretty much it. Thank you. Thank you, Connie, for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Thank you for all your comments. I don't want to miss anyone. Okay, I will be closing the commissioner comments at this time. And I want to then at this time call for a motion to receive this very fine presentation that we had this morning. Do I hear a motion?
I move that we accept the presentation that we received this morning.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we received the presentation this morning. Staff, can you please take the vote?
Sure. Chair Cunningham?
Yes.
Vice Chair Parrish?
Yes.
Commissioner Bose?
Yes.
Commissioner Tadachari?
Yes.
And then Commissioner Gandhi Koda? Okay.
Okay, yeah. So see, Commissioner Gandhi Koda is not here, at least it doesn't show on mine.
Correct, absent.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify in my mind that was. Okay, I want to thank you all. I want to thank the public again for coming out this morning. And we will be moving on to the regular meeting activities that we do every meeting. I'm thinking this is where we moved the approval of the minutes from October the 14th, and we do have a quorum. I know that Commissioner Gandhi Koda Tadachari cannot vote on this one, but there's still 3 of us here. So do we have any comments on the minutes from October 14th?
No, no.
Okay, I had just one comment, which is that it showed that I was abstaining and yet I was actually absent in September. So I was wondering if we could change that from abstaining to absent for me.
Connie, just to clarify, when we just looked through, and thank you, Chair Cunningham gave a heads up on this input. So we looked into it. And what we understand from the recording is that you were not absent from the vote, but you abstained from voting since you were absent in September. So that would be an abstain for those minutes, if we have the record correct, if you agree.
Yeah, I'll just say yes, because that distinction is just lost on me a little bit. But
let me try it again. I want to make sure we have the record correct.
Okay.
So you abstained from voting on the approval of the September minutes. You weren't absent from the vote, but you abstained from voting since you were absent in September.
Oh.
So if that sounds like the correct chain of events, then I think the minutes are good.
Okay, that's a very fine explanation. I got it the second time. Very good, very good. So yeah, I withdraw my problem. And so do we have a motion to accept the minutes?
I move that we accept the minutes for the October 14th meeting as written.
Thank you, Sue. And do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Tessa. It's been moved and seconded that we will approve the minutes from October 14th. Can you call a vote, please, Carrie?
Sure. Chair Cunningham,
Yes.
Vice Chair Parrish,
Yes.
Commissioner Bose,
Yes.
Commissioner Tadachari,
I don't think I can vote on that, so
so abstain.
abstain.
Okay, Commissioner Gandhi Koda. Okay, absent.
Okay, thank you. So after that piece of business, let's see, wait a minute. My notes, there they are. So after that and that and that. Now it is time for the staff and commission report. Carrie, do you have any reports for us this morning?
Sure, let me look at my notes. With all of the background meeting management, I would be happy if the commission went first and I can get caught up just to not lag the meeting. A lot of material moving this morning.
Okay. Sue, do you have any commission reports?
No.
Tessa?
Nope.
Govind?
I attended mayor's meeting. That's pretty much what it is. Other than that, I don't have anything to report.
Okay, we can cover your mayor's meeting then in the next bullet because there's a special topic just for mayors. So you can do yours and I'll do mine then from yesterday. Okay, so I'm sorry that didn't take very long.
I'm prepared. So the big thing I wanted to mention to you is that the future work program the suggestions for the future work program item will be coming to commission in January. So that will be January 9th, and the packet will come out shortly after the New Year. City Hall will be closed between Christmas and New Year's. And so the packet will come out shortly after that, if not before, if we can get it done.
Okay. And so
Chair, if you don't mind, I just need to pick up my power because my computer is almost at the last moment. Give me a second. I'll just pick up the power cord.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, that's fine because we're moving on to the topic for the mayor's meetings. And although Commissioner Tadachari has one, I also have one from yesterday. So I can do mine now. And then he can pick up when he comes back. Let's make sure I have it here. Okay, so this was yesterday, December the 8th, 5:00 p.m. And Mayor Darcy, as you may know, has been reappointed or elected by his peers as the mayor. So he was the mayor. And Liang Chow was also elected as the vice chair, serving for next year. Then I wanted to also say that Diane Thompson is going to be acting city manager until January, when Jim Throop is going to begin his term in January the 3rd. As part of as representing the Housing Commission, I described the housing element requirements and the online simulation tool, and I provided links and invited all the commissioners to come today and also this evening, particularly, to the Balancing Act tool. And I asked them to invite everyone else on their commission, and of course, any friends and stuff that they might have that might be interested. I also told them about the engagecupertino.org/housing element link, that it's available where they can share ideas and thoughts there. I also mentioned to them that they didn't need to be a resident, and I was specifically focused, and I told them the teen commissioner and then the young library commissioner, since they may not even be thinking about housing at this time, but nevertheless, it's our future that we're thinking about, and having young people be able to afford homes. Mayor Paul was interested in the housing element, and he pointed out what a couple of us pointed out is the traffic issue and how they're related with the housing, and we need to work on that. And I agree with that. And excuse me. also mentioned that it was important, I mentioned that it was important that we talk about the benefits of the new housing that would be made for our city, as well as any concerns we have about traffic and so forth, because it's a dynamic we need to work on. It was very interesting to see that commissions work together. The Library and Teen Commissions work together on a couple of things, Library and Fine Arts Commissions, Public Safety and Tech work together, and Mayor Paul was interested in commissions working together. I note that we oftentimes have a person here, a representative from the Planning Commission, because our duties do meet up from time to time, like especially in this housing element. Just so you know, the library has a donation drop-off for food drive for West Valley Community Services, if you would like to make a donation drop there. The library also has a donor wall, and it's still open to people who would like to donate and put their name on the wall. Then, let's see, the library is going to have a ribbon cutting in February. They're a very busy commission, and it's just wonderful to see that coming along. The Teen Commission is working on mental health for teens. That's a very important topic. Ilongo Ganga from the Pike Ped Commission, they're working on several projects, including Vision Zero, and also several of the trail projects. He updated us on that. The Planning Commission, Vikram was there. So talking about our interest in that group, he advised that the Planning Commission has approved 2 developments that would be coming to the City Council next for approval. Canyon Crossing and Bate Brothers, 2 different locations, 2 different housing proposals. He told us that there had been concern that retail wasn't included in the Bate Brothers proposal, although it was zoned for mixed use. And he suggested that the Planning Commission, he asks and suggests that the Planning Commission be involved sooner in the review process for projects. And Mayor Paul was very interested in that process topic. Eric Sean, who is from Public Safety, he thanked the mayor for the budget for a domestic violence banner. They've been working on senior strategy as well. Daisy Liang was there from the audit committee. They're having a meeting in December, like next week, to talk about the audit. Sudha from Fine Arts, they partnered with the Library Commission to establish COVID poster. I think it was some kind of competition for elementary schools. And they're going to have a second Art Talk series. If you're interested in the Art Talk series, you would want to chime in there. And then Prober Morty from the Tech Commission, he's interested in using tech to solve theft problems. And Public Safety said, yes, they would like to be involved in that. It was a very interesting meeting, and Mayor called it at 6 o'clock because he had to go pick up his daughter. So anyway, that was very interesting. It was nice to be there. So I am now closing
all ready for Pam.
and it would be
Okay,
Golden.
I'll be there soon.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah, I think somebody needs to be muted there.
yeah,
Okay.
that's Janet Van Zoren. Would you mute?
I took care of it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank
Okay,
you. I really appreciate Tony's very detailed information from the mayor's meeting. I didn't take that level of detailed information, but whatever I can recollect and whatever I made notes, I'll probably present. So
okay.
my concern had always been about RENA allocation for this particular cycle. I think it's a huge challenge for the city. So I kind of elaborated on that part in terms of comparing how much growth that would mean in terms of housing units. And I think that led to certain kinds of questions being asked by others, and I tried to answer as best as my knowledge of RENA was. And definitely it looked like, I just wanted to use that forum as a means by which to get other commissions to be interested in the housing related issues. And that was my intent. So
Right, yeah.
the other commissioners who were there were the Library Commissioner, the Tech Commissioner, and then Parks and Recreation, the Teen Commission, as well as the Bike Ped. So Teen Commission, the team was pretty new to the process. She's a new, so she could not give. She did not have as much to say. Library Commission was talking about, how the library, what is it called, edition is going on in terms of the status, and even during this pandemic, the kind of number of books being, used, and how library is being used. So that was very interesting to hear. Then Parks and Recreation, they were talking about the issue with Rancho Rinconada, election process and all what was going on there. So, I mean, for those who are interested, I think they should probably attend some of these Parks and Recreation meetings. And then the Tech Commission was talking about how they can use technology for tuning the, especially the delays and stuff like that, and how they plan to have some issue. They had some issue with on Lawrence Expressway, I believe. Somebody who was there was a police chase, and then the person who was trying to do a cross, was in the crosswalk, permitted to cross in the crosswalk. He was hit because the person who was being chased, the alleged offender was actually ran over him, something like that. So he was talking about how they plan to be able to implement something, and they are investigating that. So that, I think, was the only highlight, I would say, in terms of what I heard from Tech Commission. So that's pretty much what I have to say.
Thank you for your report back. And I would say that where we are now in the agenda is future agenda setting. I know that Carrie just mentioned that we will be discussing that January 9th. So I don't know if there's any other comments on this particular part of the agenda. Anybody? No, I seeing no's. Then it looks like we're getting ready to adjourn. But before we adjourn, I wanted to give one last shout out for the meeting tonight at 6 o'clock. All of us to go to it so that we understand better that mapping tool, the interactive one where people can put input in and get, so that as we talk to anybody we know, we can let them be aware of that meeting tonight and other ongoing use of that tool. And with that, I want to thank you all for your time today. It's been great to see you again. So I say goodbye, and the meeting is adjourned at 10:57 a.m.